All right. Well, welcome to a new episode of the KewCast. I'm John. I'm joined again by my good pal Eddie.
Hey,
How
John.
you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great, thank you.
Yeah. How was your week?
Not too bad. A couple days in a row of not being sick, so that's good.
Yeah, you're coming out of it. You were playing great today. I did not notice. I would never know that you were sick for 2 weeks. You double dipped. You triple dipped.
Well, I was saving my energy, charging up those batteries for 2 weeks. So it all came out today.
That's good. All right. Well, we've got a packed show. We've got the interview with Garrett and Kyle of Carbon to announce the TruFoam release, which is going to be the 30th of this month. But they also talk about the technology behind it and show the actual core. So that foam core with, recesses and holes and designs. It's pretty cool. So
I wasn't sure where you were going with this.
Yes, that's me running or that's a core.
Okay, got it. The new ASL.
Right. But yeah, and then we're going to jump into paddles of the week. We got a little bit of news to discuss too.
Man, a ton of good paddles this week.
Yeah, so many paddles coming out in the next 3 weeks. It's bananas. But without further ado, let's jump into it. Talk about our sponsor for this episode, which is pickleballbluebook.com. And this is a service that you can go and evaluate the value of your paddle. Brain's not working, Eddie. If you're wealthy, you can buy the most expensive paddles. But
now you'll know a good price for that paddle.
Right. Enter your paddle brand and model and condition, and you get a price to sell private party, person to person. So if you want to go onto Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace and sell your paddle, or friends to friends, and this is powered by get211.com. All right, Eddie.
Where do you want to start this week, John?
Let's start with the news.
All right.
First off, now I don't know what is going on currently with the Chorus fire, but it was delisted. I heard on some podcasts that it was relisted, but that's not the latest news that I heard. It sounds like, based on PBCoR, it had failed. So it was listed originally, and with all the new PBCoR results coming in, sounds like the Chorus Fire, which is their power paddle, has been pulled.
You know if that's all shapes, John?
I think it is.
Okay.
Yeah. But sounds like, Matt sent an email to everybody and said, I'm as confused as everyone. So we're all asking the same questions. He has an open dialogue with USAP about this, and they're reevaluating the situation. Should give updated information soon. So if I missed any communication that it has been relisted, my apologies. But as for now, sounds like more kind of PBCoR casualties.
You surprised by that? I mean,
Yeah.
I felt like the fire was definitely in the power category, but not leading the category by any means. It's a little surprising to me. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's very surprising. I would put it, bottom tier power, maybe middle tier power, but nothing close to, the Gearbox Pro Powers and the mods and that sort of thing. So, yeah, I do know that the dwell time is good on these, even though they feel really stiff because you have that fiberglass activation layer on the top surface. They actually get a good amount of dwell time, and I think Matt was openly kind of flirting with the deflection limits on that paddle, so maybe that has something to do with it. But regardless, we'll just kind of wait and figure it out. And I'm sure if you have a fire, no need to fret yet. Things are kind of moving quickly. Things are in a state of flux. So just wait for the next news from Matt. But yeah, I was pretty surprised to hear that had become a casualty of PBCoR. Okay. Any more on that from you, Eddie?
Nope.
All right.
Just waiting for more news on that. We'll wrap back up on that topic as soon as we know more information.
Gotcha. So I wanted to touch on a tweet from James Ignatowich. He said that, I'm now 100% sure that the correct shape for doubles in pickleball, the paddle, is the square, a.k.a. pancake shape paddle. And he puts the dimension 16 by 8. So standard shape, wide body shape. Just tweeting this now so I can pin it in 3 years when everybody's using one.
People are using them now.
which is kind of what we had predicted also in our predictions episode several months ago now, that once the power levels of wide body paddles reach parity with elongated paddles, then they have certain perks over elongated paddles. That being a wider sweet spot, not necessarily a longer sweet spot, but a more forgiving face side to side.
Yeah, but nothing on handle length.
Nothing on handle length. That's an important one. Like, you don't want too long of a handle on a shorter paddle because it squishes the face down.
Right.
But something you can put two hands on is pretty key for this.
So presumably that statement is about just the kind of the area of the face, just maximizing that to the full extent of the dimensions allowed in the rules.
Yeah. And I think that's going to rub a lot of people the wrong way in terms of like pros using elongated paddles who are like, what? Like, no way am I ever going to switch. And we've talked about this too. Like, I doubt that Ben Johns is ever going to switch away from his Perseus shape, which is the same shape that he added on his Franklin signature model years ago, just because he's dialed into that. And there's certain advantages to longer paddle. You get a little bit more reach and you get more leverage with the handle. But like we were talking about, once the core changes in these wide body paddles and it produces the same power output without the need to use leverage in that power equation, then you're left with a powerful paddle with a wider sweet spot, as long as you have a long enough handle.
Outside of paddle testing, John, I can't remember the last time I kept an elongated paddle in my bag.
Yeah, that's true. You know,
maybe the Pulse was the last one I had in there. And that's only because it was the only one I had access to for a while.
Gotcha.
How about you?
Yeah, been a long time. I still hit with them to test them. We were hitting with the Carbon 1 TruFoam today. And I don't mind them, but it's not my preferred shape anymore. But I've gone from hyper elongated. Remember when we were both maining the Apes Proline Energy? Like 17-inch long with a super long handle, super narrow. I've gone from that to standard elongated to standard to wide body, shorter than 16, and now I'm back into hybrid. So I'm maining the 11624 vapor power paddle, which is a hybrid shape, and I'm loving that. So I'm kind of bouncing back a little bit, but I don't think I'm ever going to bounce as far back as 16.5.
That's true, elongated.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Where are you these days, Eddie?
I would say about the same. I mean, I've really enjoyed the Franklin that we were playing with today. The new Carbon is probably the closest to what James is talking about here as far as kind of that square shape.
Yeah.
Great paddle. For me, it's about swing weight, though. I find that those standard shape paddles are a little bit easier to maneuver. Elongateds are, some of them are pushing 120 plus on swing weight, and it's just too slow for me.
Yeah. All right. Well, James, if you want to come on the pod and explain where you're going with this, because I don't know the details behind it. I just saw the tweet and grabbed it, screenshot it. So maybe he has different reasons for thinking standard shape is going to be the number one shape. I do think that the new crop of younger players, even younger than Gabe and Hayden, will take advantage of that, the shorter shapes with a better swing weight, more maneuverability, wider sweet spot, as long as they're powerful enough. So I think we're there already.
Presumably he feels differently about playing singles. If you were to play in a singles match, would you try and go for an elongated or just stick with your main?
I've admitted, Eddie, that I am not a singles player. I used to think I was, and I'm just not. But yeah, it doesn't feel right to have a wide body paddle playing singles just because you do have to cover more court. And, it doesn't feel like you're losing that much length, but I'm kind of a hypocrite to say that minuscule amounts of space on a paddle don't matter. Having a half an inch more length on a paddle does actually matter in terms of its playability, and you can stretch a little further and all that. How about you?
Yeah, but the vapor that you're maining is, that's pretty close to an elongated.
It's like
0.3
or 0.2.
It's getting really close.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think in a lot of areas of life, a half inch makes a big difference.
No pun intended. Yeah, well, let's move on to your favorite segment.
Yeah.
And mine, Paddles of the Week. We're going to slot in the interview with Carbon after this. So let's jump straight into it, Eddie. We've got a lot of paddles to cover this
where do you want to start?
let's go with the Ronbus Ripple. Not that we haven't talked about this before, but it did pass the PBCoR, so that was big news last week. We just got the new PBCoR certified, so you can see on here there's a 0.43 certified. Now that does not mean that this paddle is exactly 0.43. I think it must be close. If it's not, then something's wrong with PBCoR because this is still a very hot paddle.
It is.
But only the R1 shape is passed thus far. The R2, the owner of Ronbus didn't get the actual paperwork yet. As far as I know, it's not that the R2 didn't pass. It's just that the paperwork's taking longer, and we're entering Chinese New Year, so we're going to be pushed back for the R2 shape for at least a couple of months, right? But the R1 shape went on sale last Friday, and they're getting a big shipment in. I think the sale last Friday was to Connect members, and now in a week, here at the end of January, they are going to be sold mass market. So we've been all over the place with these, and we've talked about it extensively on this pod and every other pickleball podcast in the space. Kind of the brief history of this is we were sent what's now called the beta ripples in the R1 and R2 shapes. And we both loved those. There's unanimously considered a great paddle. Big sweet spot, incredible spin, good power, but not crazy power. Now, those did break in a bit. So they started about where the Paddletech Bantam levels paddles are, probably a little higher to start with. You put them more like the mod. But then they heated up to like a broken-in gearbox. Then they put out a production model, which is not this, which is now the first era of the production models, which sounded different. They're super deep in tone and hit harder, much harder. So they started out about where the betas ended up after break-in. And the production models, the original production models, presumably broke in. I just couldn't play with it. It was too powerful. Like it wasn't even fun. Now they sent us the PBCoR certified ones, which is the production models that they're actually going to be selling. And in my estimation, they're about what the beta models they originally sent to us feel like. So they don't have the super deep tone. I'll grab a ball, we can bounce. There's the older iterations on the wall behind you, but they sound quite different and they hit different.
It's still pretty deep-throated, I would say.
Yeah, let me get a ball.
Yeah.
All right, so this is the latest PBCoR certified.
Yeah, that's deep.
It's deep. It's a Gen 3 sound. But compare that to, let's see which one this is.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's the original production model. Grab that 14, the R2 behind you.
Is this the original?
I can't. Let's hit it and find out.
Oh,
yeah. I mean, it sounds like a wood block.
It does.
And then that's the beta version behind you. So hit that one. I pass it over here. It's exactly the same tone.
Got a game going here. Let's go.
So I think they play very similar, the beta versions. Okay. All of this to say, this is going to be a really popular paddle. Ethics aside, if you don't believe that pickleball should have this firepower in its game, then you do have to kind of think, okay, this paddle plays great. Otherwise, it gets great spin. It has a good sweet spot. We're gonna break out the graffiti and get some swing weight and twist weight measurements. This newest model feels heavier stock than the originals. The originals are really light. You had to really weight them up. This one felt pretty good hitting straight out of the box, and I just added 3 grams on each side. I imagine the swing weight's a little higher also. But yeah, I mean, to me, it feels nearly identical to the beta models. Maybe even slightly more muted, but it's definitely a elite power paddle. I would put it above the Paddletech Bantam series, and probably above the Gearbox Pro Ultimate also. Not as much as the Gearbox Pro Power that has been delisted. Mm-hmm. In terms of the mod, I don't know. I want to hit these side by side with the mod, but it's pretty close to the mod. How about you?
Yeah, they're definitely not lacking in juice. There's still plenty of power there. I need a little bit more time with it. I've got only about 20 minutes with this particular iteration.
Okay.
And knowing that break-in is a thing, I'd like to report back in about 8 hours or so and just see where things, if there's change, where it levels off, and just see where that power ends up.
Yeah. You know, I know that part of the reason for the different iterations of this paddle, originally were to fix the edge guard. So the top of the paddle had an edge guard issue. And judging from the x-rays of the original beta versus the first production model, they kind of pushed up those ribs inside the core. There's less foam boundary at the top of the paddle in the newer ones. I didn't get a chance to x-ray this one. I just got it yesterday or day before.
Yep.
You got yours too, right?
Yep.
And, you know, I don't know if it looks more like the beta or the original first production model or what, but that was the reasoning behind, you know, adjusting things in the core, was to fix that edge guard issue. I did reach out to Dong, the owner of Ripple, and I said, hey, you know, I've been hitting with this one for a few hours. It plays differently than the first production model and more similar to the beta, and it sounds less deep, less bassy than the first production model. And he emailed back and said, yeah, you know, sorry about that. The first production models you and Eddie received, and apparently most other paddle reviewers, had some elements of a newer design that they're going to be instituting in Ripples down the line.
Goodness.
So I don't know if it was mistakenly sent to everybody or what, but these newest ones do hit like the betas. So if you are a Connect member and you got the beta, it's going to hit very similar. And it's not as crazy powerful as the first production models. So that being said, I think that if people who are playing with a mod now, which there's a legion of people playing with mods out there, if they don't know about the Ripple, then they soon will. And it's going to be a very popular paddle because it does hit like a mod, but even with probably a slightly bigger sweet spot. I can't really speak to it. It's a bit chaotic right now because, you know, we can't really speak to breakage because break-in happened on the original betas. Break-in, we didn't get a chance to test the break-in on the first production models because they started so hot and we didn't get a chance to play with them much. I want to test this. You know, I will put out a review, but I'll be very cautious in the review that if you do not like the idea of your paddle breaking in and getting hotter, then wait, don't buy this yet, you know, because I think there's going to be a rush to buy these because they play great. They're super powerful, but, you know, they would, if they ended up being the most powerful paddle on the market, even more powerful than the Gearbox Pro Powers and the mods after they break in, then that's an issue. So
sure it is.
We'll see.
Yep. What did you think of the soft game and blocks and resets with this so far?
It's a good paddle.
Yeah, but that's how the original started off.
Yeah, it's just a good paddle. I mean, they're clearly, it's elite power, but it's still controllable. Now, it's not that it's going to be as controllable as a soft control paddle like the Volar Mach 2 Forza, but for a elite power paddle, it's still controllable. It's not, you know, it's way more controllable than the Gearbox Pro Powers were.
Sure, and the sweet spot is indication of that.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
And when you soften up your grip with lighter strokes, it doesn't shoot, the ball doesn't shoot off like crazy, but with a little bit of, it's that exponential power curve, right?
Sure.
It's soft and controllable when you're not swinging it hard. When you swing it hard, it delivers a big punch.
All right, moving on.
Let's move on. All right.
It's a lot of Ronbus.
Thank you. Let's move on to the Honolulu power paddles. I briefly mentioned those on the week that you were sick, Eddie, and showed them. And but we got a chance. I've been hitting with them more. You got a chance to hit with them side by side today. So we've got the J2K Plus and the J2 Ti Plus. So exactly the same shapes as their hugely popular J2K and J2 Ti. So this hybrid shape with the same facing materials. So Kevlar on the J2K and a titanium PET weave with carbon fiber on the Ti. But the core is different. So it's a Gen 3 core. And I did x-ray them, and it's a floating core. It looks pretty similar to the 11624 power paddles, but there are, instead of having one band of thicker EVA foam like the 11624 paddles, the Honolulu paddles have what looks like, I haven't confirmed this with Jam, the owner, but it looks like layer of edge foam, like thermoform paddles, and then another interior layer of some kind of foam. We don't know what it is yet, but it encircles the polypropylene, so it floats the polypropylene. Eddie, what are your thoughts on how they played?
The J2 Ti Plus, for some reason I was having just a very difficult time with launch angle, vertically and horizontally. So let's call it a control issue with that particular paddle, and I don't know why it would be that way. Perhaps it's the stiffness of the face. It does feel a little bit stiffer than the other paddle, but was having a hard time with it. I mean, I still played pretty well with it. I think it's a great paddle, but if I had to pick one of these two, it would be the J2K Plus.
Okay.
For me, just the control factor was there really all day with that one versus the other.
Yeah, it's odd. I wonder what about the TI Plus was causing those issues. I did notice on the receiving end today when we were playing, you hit a few into the net. I didn't notice them going wide. But was it just that the launch angle was lower than expected, or just kind of all over the place?
It was low and high.
Okay. Interesting.
And I don't normally do that.
Yeah.
And I very rarely miss serves.
No.
And a bunch were just not even high on the net, just smack dab in the middle.
I mean, it might be something extremely personal to you. We're not saying that this is an uncontrollable paddle. I didn't have any issues.
Yeah,
with
I'm
it.
sure if I played with it solidly, even just for a few hours, I could resolve that. But
it's weird for you to do that because you normally have like laser pinpoint accuracy, so much so that your drives hit the net 50% of the time and then drop in.
Well, we played with 12 paddles today, and that was the only one.
The only one.
So
I noticed that too. On the other hand, I didn't have any issues with it. Where would you put the power levels of these two compared to the original J2K and TI?
Boy, I'd have to hit them side by side, but if just going by recollection, I would put them just a touch more powerful.
Yeah, same.
Okay.
Yeah, it was surprising to me. Looking at the X-rays of the core, knowing that they're Gen 3 construction, I expected a higher power output from these, and they were very muted for a Gen 3 paddle. Yes, they're above the power and pop levels of the J2K and J2 Ti, but not much. The main difference I noticed between these and the originals is more dwell time on these, and just a kind of a softer, plusher feel, maybe slightly bigger sweet spots. I mean, the original sweet spots were big enough, but these feel very good, and it's a very satisfying feel to hit with these. I mean, it's not as foamy feeling as the Ripple, but it's definitely, it grabs the ball a little longer than, especially the J2K. Now, the J2 Ti had that better dwell time than the J2K, so if you like the softer feel of the paddle, that was your choice. But these are exactly the same as the originals, except both have proportionally more dwell time and just feel softer and slightly more powerful. But I kind of like where the power is. Now, one issue is, are these going to break in and get more powerful? We don't know yet. We haven't played with them enough, so I cannot.
This Ti is super gritty. Did you notice that?
Yeah, you can file your nails with that. Great spin on these. I think with the dwell time and the grit together, it's creating a pretty special spin paddle. But yeah, I mean, and where they start, I'd say that these are both an improvement over the original J2K and J2 Ti. I think I heard from Lewis at Pickleball Pursuit that his prototype did break in and get hotter. And I think he compared it to like a mod where it is now versus when it started. So I don't know if that was just an issue with the prototypes or if we can expect a break in with these. And I know that Jam, the owner of Honolulu, also is setting up, precautions for people that in case these do break in, he's going to provide discounts or something for other paddles. So, there's a possibility they may break in.
You actually gave me two of these same two models, but they were, I don't know if they were early production or even late prototype, but they were unbranded.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they were just a Sharpie on them. They do play a little bit different, so I'm not sure what happened between that and these.
Okay.
I would say these are more playable than the unbranded ones that you gave me.
Okay. The unbranded ones, are they more powerful than these?
No, they're stiffer, and I would say a little less plush feeling.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
But these are great.
I do like these a lot. The only thing that we need to find out is if they break in or not. So time will tell.
What are your thoughts if you had to pick between those two?
I like the J2K
Same.
Plus better.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, the TI is cool in the sense that it's super plush, but I need to run all the tests on these and get power and pop. But I would kind of put the J2 TI Plus about where the J2K is in terms of overall firepower. It's a little bit more power balanced versus pop compared to the J2K, which is more pop balanced versus power. But when you average those out, I'd put them about the same tier, which is, in the all-court category, leaning a little bit power, not much, but a little bit, versus the J2K Plus, which is all-court leaning power solidly, right? And it provides enough plushness and dwell time for my taste, but I still feel connected to the ball. The J2 TI Plus is very dwelly, but it's almost like you're less connected to the ball once you get a certain amount of dwell time, and plushness. It's just you're taking away a little bit of that connection to the ball, if you know what I mean.
Yep.
But yeah. So yours is your favorite is also the J2K Plus.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's that control issue that we already spoke about is one that's I think easily overcome with just a little bit of time. But honestly, I don't want to think that hard about launch angle. I just want a paddle to work for me and my game.
Yeah.
And maybe it's the dwell time that is the cause of that particular issue. But for me, my style and the playability factor, J2K.
All right. We're in agreement.
All right.
Okay. Body Helix sent us some paddles, and these are in their FLIK line, which is kind of their equivalent to Selkirk Labs, kind of experimental and research and innovation forward. But these are I think there's more shapes. I have them in here, but
there's an elongated shape. Right?
There's an elongated shape. We have with these standard wide body shapes, which I do like this shape.
Oh man, this shape is great. The long handle and the squarish face really works in this case.
Yeah. It's pretty aesthetically pleasing for a wide body paddle. And functional too, because the handle's long enough to fit two hands on. Ever since that oversized FLIK, I feel like all of the Body Helix paddles are massive, giant. But this one at least is USAP approved. Now, I got some emails from Fred, the owner, and he said that the goal with these was to produce two tiers of paddles, a power line and a control line. And the power line being about what he estimated to be 10% less powerful than the Yola Mod and the Gearbox Pro Power paddles. But it sounds like there have been some issues with these passing PBCoR and deflection. So this one it's not USAP certified, it's only FLIK certified.
FLIK approved.
Still FLIK approved. So still in the experimental phase. So something went south with this in terms of passing the PBCoR. And then deflection possibly also. I do see the reports he sent with x-rays, and the paddles are completely blank inside and the x-ray.
What does that mean? Just full foam?
Which tells me it's full foam.
Okay.
Some sort of foam, right? So I don't know exactly what the foam is. I'd be happy to cut one open and check it out. But yeah, it's just like tabula rasa inside the paddle.
That FLIK-approved paddle was nuts.
Well, we got to play with both of these today. So the USAP approved one let's talk about that one first.
Yeah.
Less gritty for sure. And yeah, I'd put this kind of all court leaning control.
I'd just place it firmly in all court.
Oh, right in the middle of all court? Okay. You get enough power with full swings. It felt softish at the kitchen.
I love the way it feels. I mean, I'm resetting all day with this thing.
You're great with the resets on this. But yeah, the sweet spot was a little bit, I wouldn't say small, but not as robust, I would say, for a Gen 2 thermoformed wide body.
It is a bit of a smaller face. I mean, that handle does take away from some of the square footage of the face. So I would say proportionally, it's probably about the same sweet spot, but because it's a smaller face, it's a smaller sweet spot.
And it probably shored up very easily.
Yes.
With perimeter weighting, which we did not use. So I think what I was feeling was kind of the twisting on off-center shots that most wide body paddles without weight experience.
Agree.
And then onto the FLIK one, the F1, instead of the, all right, it says FLIK.
One's the
TerraCore.
XC and the other's.
Yeah. So the XC is USAP approved, the F1 TerraCore is not. This one is definitely more power oriented. You were hitting some bangers with this, man. Yeah. How'd you like it?
It's fun. I'll give it that. Obviously, it's not one that I would use and play, but
it's funny.
What's the PBCoR on that?
I don't know if this is exactly the same one, but I see a 0.51 PBCoR, which that does not feel like much more powerful than the Ronbus Ripple R1. And I feel like it's less powerful than you were getting some good shots. I only played with it a few points, so I can't really say for sure, but it wasn't like hitting me over the head like, wow, this is a crazy power paddle.
No, I would have guessed it would have been not just below like Gearbox and the mod.
Yeah, that's about where I'd put it too. But we got to find out where this 0.51 comes from, because it did not feel like a cannon in my hands. But it felt fun. I would love to play with that and get more time with it. But yeah, probably won't be hitting the market in its current form.
But the paddle looks great. I love the handles that Body Helix is doing now. That PU handle is just very firm, very uniform. The sides feel the exact same as the top. It just feels really nice. I think it's probably my favorite handle in production today.
Yeah, good stuff from Body Helix. Glad to see them innovating. I think they're gonna hit it out of the park this year with a really good paddle.
They just keep getting better.
Yeah,
and I'm gonna give this one some more time to see where that break-in ends up.
Eddie, let's move on to the next paddle on the list. So Franklin is coming out with a C45. We talked about it last week in terms of the buzz that it generated at the PBA in Hayden's hand and the Johnson siblings and Paris Todd.
Is the 45 the direction of the weave? Is that where that comes from?
Exactly.
Okay.
So the 45 is the angle of the unidirectional carbon fiber on the top, which is not oriented vertically as most unidirectional carbon fiber paddles are, but at a 45 degrees. So I talked with Ryan at Franklin for a good while, and he kind of gave me a PowerPoint. I'm not allowed to show any of the images yet, but we can talk about it. And we played with it today, and you've been playing with it. We both have been playing with it for a few days now. So the layup, since we're talking about the angle of the layup, so there are 3 layers of carbon fiber on each side. So the first one is laid at 45 degrees, and the middle is laid at 90 degrees, and the inner at 45 degrees. Yeah, so it's doom, doom, doom.
Yep.
Right? So what happens to the performance of a paddle when you change the orientation of the fibers is it becomes stiffer or more plush. And there are vibration frequencies that are associated with these. So most paddles are orienting their unidirectional fibers at 90 degrees to one another. What that creates is a very stiff face. So you can imagine if you just lined up a bunch of fibers parallel to each other, you can do this with a carbon fiber sheet. It bends super easy in one direction and it's stiff in the other direction. So if you line up the stiff direction one way and the stiff direction at 90 degrees to that, you're taking away that flexibility on the x-axis, right? And the y-axis on both are super stiff. So stiff, and as you're moving more toward 45 or even less, more flexible. So what this has is 45, 90, 45. So it's going to be a more flexible arrangement of the layup. And the bottom layer is not actually fiberglass. I think there's some confusion on that, but it's actually a treated layer of carbon fiber also.
But 3 layers total.
3 layers total, right. And peel ply on top for the texture. Now, where it additionally gets interesting is the thermoforming process. So it's a different type of thermoforming. It's actually a 2-stage process. So where most thermoforming involves cutting out the shape of a paddle with the layup and the core, and then sticking that shape of a paddle in a metal, usually aluminum, mold, closing that up, sticking it in an oven, applying pressure and heat to it to kind of cure everything together, and then pulling it out. What they're doing here is creating just a big slab of the layup and the core materials, right? So it's polypropylene, 3 layers of carbon fiber on each side. They create like a 8 by 8 foot sheet of this. They put that in a mold, thermoform it in the oven.
And then machine it out.
Then bring it out, machine out the shapes of the paddles. So it's already been thermoformed at this stage once. Machine out the shapes of the paddles. They use a computer to cut a groove into the edge to insert the foam, 2 layers of foam in the edge, which is another difference from traditional thermoforming. And all other Gen 3 paddles thus far have been placing the foam in the mold to begin with and then sticking that into the oven. Well, here, and they cut basically the polypropylene down to make it smaller. Here they're thermoforming it, creating a groove with a machining tool, a computer machining tool, to insert the foam, so it's highly accurate, and they're able to kind of QC the level of exactness of that groove. And then they're putting 2 layers of foam in it, so they're both closed cell foam. So you don't have the expanding foam in the edge, kind of that yellowish stuff that if you squeeze it, it just eventually just breaks up, in your fingers. It's a layer of polyurethane foam on the outside and then EVA foam on the inside. Now, the layer of polyurethane foam on the outside is encapsulated in a carbon fiber tube, similar to what we see as expanding foam and thermoformed paddles. So it's like rolling a cigarette, right? Except you have this layer of foam that does expand under heat, and then the EVA foam is inside that. So the expanding PU foam expands to the maximum extent of the carbon fiber tube, and it pushes the EVA foam inward toward the core. So it kind of squishes it a little bit and creates a little bit of tension in there, and that provides the, vibration damping and the extra power and dwell time and all the good stuff that they were searching for.
But the polypropylene doesn't get mangled in that process?
No, and he showed me. Not allowed to show it, but once the review comes out, we'll X-ray it and dissect it and show. But you've seen my X-rays and you've seen my dissections of all the Gen 3 paddles, notably the actually any. I'm not going to call out any companies because this happens to all Gen 3 paddles where there is expanding foam next to polypropylene. The polypropylene cells next to the foam get damaged a bit, right? They're crushed inward and not necessarily crushed like a sandwich like we see happening with core crushing and breakage, but this kind of lateral pressure.
Pushing of the walls inward.
So the foam expands and it pushes and it kind of crushes the cells because they're basically just, cutting with a bandsaw, right? This polypropylene to fit the foam. Whereas the Franklin paddles, from what I've seen and heard, it's the machining and it's very precise. And you can see it too, right? They dissected one and none of the polypropylene cells adjacent to the foam had been crushed inward. They all look fairly pristine. But it all looks good, sounds exciting. It looks really high quality. We put a lot of thought into this, and I love it that Franklin is pushing the envelope this year with their technology. Should we move on to how they play?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we got the hybrid shape. Do we have one? All right. What color is the edge? It looks blue to me. Is it purple?
It's actually a really nice looking kind of a pearlescent blue.
Okay. So I can see it.
It's fantastic.
It does look good. It does kind of scuff, and when you...
Yeah, weirdly, when you scuff it, it's kind of yellowish underneath.
Okay, yeah, so that kind of glossy layer comes off pretty easily, but I do love the look of these. So this is a hybrid shape, a new shape from Franklin with it looks like a 5.5-inch handle, plenty of room there, and a 14-inch width, a thickness on this.
Millimeter.
14. That's a thick paddle. 14 millimeter thickness. But I think they, with the curved top and the being a bit more narrow, I think they were looking to really increase maneuverability. Now, these things come out super light stock, which is funny because their series before this, what are those called?
The Tour?
The Tour series. Were just, some of those were crazy heavy, right? So like 140 swing weight or something crazy. But this one is, what was yours? You measured the swing weight.
My stock swing weight was at 107. Very light.
Okay. And I took it out and hit it stock and noticed right away that, this thing needs some weight. I mean, it's super maneuverable in your hands, but the sweet spot felt fairly narrow, especially for a thermoform paddle. And today we played with yours, Eddie, and you put how much weight?
18 grams.
18 grams.
Yeah,
so you had
that's a lot.
3 gram strips at the shoulders here, one right at 3 and 9, and then one at
and even
top
at that,
corners.
it was the swing weight only came out to 117.
And it played so much better than stock.
Night and day.
You opened up that sweet spot, and
twist weight went from 5.6 to 7.0.
That explains it right there. Yeah, that's a huge jump in sweet spot. I mean, give me your thoughts, Eddie, on how you feel like it plays.
I play so well with this paddle, John. Weighted up, and I can't think of the last time I put that much weight on a paddle, but it really does need it, just to shore it up, to give it some feel. I mean, it's so light, you really can't even feel the paddle a lot of the time stock. Yeah. But I play so well with this. It just does what you want it to do, set up in this way.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel the best. There's some vibration that comes through the handle. Not one of the best feeling paddles out there, but in terms of just shot performance, placement, power, it does a lot of things really well.
I hear you on the vibrations. I was noticing those too. I thought it was flexing at the neck, but I was like, how in the world does a double thermoform paddle flex at the neck? But I think it just might be weird vibrations going through. I forgot to mention in the whole discussion of the thermoforming process, not only do they thermoform, but before they cut out the mold, but then they thermoform it a second time, right? And it's not as if they're baking the crap out of them until it melts. They're precisely controlling the temperature and pressure. So anyway.
I didn't feel any flex.
You didn't feel any flex?
No.
I thought it was flex, but I might just be feeling some weird vibration frequencies coming into the handle.
But it's so noticeable. It's like, that was kind of a crap shot. But then it tells those are winners. I mean, they're solid drives or solid dinks or whatever. They just don't feel very good.
Yeah. It tells you when you hit off center, right? It's built into the paddle. But I think to me the power is not crazy. I don't know if it's going to break in also, and the goal of this was it not to break in. They want to keep that to 0 or at minimum. But I'd say it's below the level of a Bantam, Paddletech Bantam series firepower. So the thinner ones, like the 12.7 millimeter thickness, maybe close to like the 14.3 millimeter thicknesses for the ESQC and the ALWC. How about you?
Yeah, I would not call this a power paddle.
Really?
Very low on the power scale. Maybe all court leaning power, but it's I would not even put it with like an Apes Pulse in terms of power.
Oh, I think it's there.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's a power paddle. Interesting that we have different perspectives.
At least a broken impulse.
Yeah. I mean, broken impulse, maybe the elongated one. But, it has a Gen 3 sound, not as deep as Hayden's sounded.
No.
So
I was expecting much different.
Yeah. Hayden's very much sounded like a beta, a first production model Ripple. But yeah, even the latest Ripple, you can hear it's just a deeper thud, right?
It's definitely gotten deeper for the time that I've played mine.
Which one? The Ripple?
The Franklin.
Oh, the Franklin. Okay. Yeah, I think yours is deeper than mine. And I think that the lead or the tungsten also changes the tone of the hit. But solid paddle. I want more time with it. I think I would really enjoy playing with it. I want to try the other shapes too. They're not coming for a couple of months. This one's coming out in February though. This is going to be the first launch is coming up soon.
I hope they come out with a 16. I think the extra just dimension on that would help with weight distribution and overall feel of the paddle.
All right, Eddie, should we move on? We'll come back to the C45 in a minute, but move on to the last paddles, end paddles of the week. So Vatic has a new shape, new wide body shape. It's called the Bloom. And it comes in their Saga paddle. It also comes in their Prism paddle. So the Prism is the kind of the control-oriented one, and the Saga is their latest paddle that you and I are both very fond of with the wide cell polypropylene. Yeah, I enjoyed these. I only had a few points with each of them today, but the Saga in particular was a lot of fun for me to play with. It feels like a prism, as you would expect, being wider. So it's a little softer feeling because of the wide face. It has the same power pop profile of the original Saga. That being, with slower swings, you're getting a nice plush, controllable feel. With bigger swings, you get enough pretty good power, right? But yeah, this is like, if you like wide body paddles and you like the Saga, but you prefer it in a wide body shape, that's exactly what you'd expect for that paddle.
I would say if you like the Saga and you are undecided about wide body or would like to give it a try, this is one really worth exploring, because it does fractionally change the feel of the paddle. Like you said, it softens it up a little bit. And I love my Saga. I use it all the time. Mm-hmm. It's one of my mains. But if I have a complaint, it's that I would like for it to actually be a little bit softer, and this is. Yeah,
a little more forgiving. I didn't put any weight on it yet, but with weight, man, this thing is going to be a control beast.
Yeah, and they do a great job with their handles too in terms of feel and length.
Yeah. I mean, for that shape, I would put it right in the middle of the all-court category.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
I'm keeping it.
So good power. Good power with full swings, but very controllable for the soft game. And then the Prism also plays like what you would think the Prism
so good
would feel like in a wide body. So softer, very controllable. Good paddles.
Yeah, and just for the money, it's really difficult to beat something like this.
Yeah. They're not out yet. I didn't get a release date, but I'll put it in the podcast as B-roll, so everybody knows when it's coming. All right, Eddie, we had a showdown today on the courts. We took the two paddles that we thought people might most be interested in comparing, at least. And you and I played skinny singles, 4 games. Actually, did we do 6 games? I can't remember.
No, we
had a tiebreaker.
Okay. 4 games.
4 games each, and took our total points that we scored with each of these paddles and kind of compared them to see which one was the winner.
Yeah, just equalize kind of the differences between us. We switched paddles kind of halfway through to make sure that one of us wasn't overperforming with one paddle and never using the other one.
Right. So we played a game. You had the CRBN TruFoam originally, and I had the Franklin C45. Finished that game. We switched paddles. We ended up scoring exactly the same for each of the paddles. So there was no difference. So it was meaningless. So we had a tiebreaker and played 2 additional games with rally scoring and then tallied those. So first, before we give away the winners for each of us, let's talk about our experience and compare them directly to each other. So we're both playing with the Carbon 2 shape, so your wide body shape.
Yeah.
And you played with yours, I played with mine. I put 2.5 grams of tungsten at 3 and 9, and that's the way I prefer it. You like yours, interestingly, with no weight on it.
I would love to add more weight. It just the paddle's a little bit heavy stock, and so there's no capacity to add any weight. And frankly, it plays pretty darn good without anything.
Yeah. How would you compare these head to head in terms of feel, firepower, forgiveness, spin?
Oh boy, I think that they are pretty well matched, but in different ways. Mm-hmm. I'd give the Carbon a little bit more on the firepower side of things. The dwell time, I would say, is more on the Carbon, but the Franklin's more maneuverable. It's got directional control like crazy. So I think they both bring their strengths.
Yeah. Interesting that the Franklin is more maneuverable, even though it's slightly longer, because it is a little skinnier and has the arrow curve top. And something about the paddle itself is just lighter stock, right? And yours is weighted up 18 grams or whatever.
Even then, it feels light.
Yeah. It does feel lighter than Carbon TruFoam. My direct head-to-head comparison, I would say that the Carbon TruFoams, one of their biggest strengths is crazy spin they get. And that's from a combination of the peel ply texture and the dwell time that they're getting. You mentioned that this gets more dwell time than the C45. And I agree. But man, I got crazy spin numbers when I tested these, like, way high 2300s into the 2400s. So they're going to be like 99th percentile for spin. And like I said, I think that comes from the dwell time. So being able to shape the ball with these carbon TruFoams, I think, is probably their key strength. And they're great paddles all around, but that's one of the key performance perks of them. And the spin on the Franklin is good. Also, it's not as crazy as the carbon TruFoam, but it is a peel ply. It gets plenty of spin. You're not going to have problems shaping the ball with the Franklin, but you're going to do it better with the carbon. I think the power pop profile of the carbon TruFoam is overall firepower is higher, a little higher than the C45, not by a whole bunch. This is not an elite power paddle. It doesn't get crazy power like the Ronbus Ripple is going to get, and that's designed that way. They didn't want that level of power. I would put it at the bottom tier power, and below the Paddletech Bantams and, entry level power paddle. And mine hasn't broken in weeks of playing with it to any great extent. I think there's a little bit of break in as things loosen up, similar to the Apes, where it gets a little bit more dwelly, more plush, wider sweet spot, et cetera, but not anything going on much at all with power. It's less of a exponential and more of a linear power curve with the TruFoams, where just a little bit of movement delivers quite a bit of pop, and full swings isn't going to blow anybody off the court. It's just but it's still going to get more power than with more velocity put into it. Versus this paddle, which does have more of a exponential power curve. It's not a crazy power paddle, but you can feel it. It feels a little softer when you're dinking, and then when you wind up on it, it delivers a bit more power. But it is also a poppy paddle, the C45. Like I said, I need to run the tests and figure out exactly where they fall in terms of percentiles with other paddles in the database. But like you said, more maneuverable, probably a little less overall firepower with the Franklin than the carbon. Carbon gets crazy spin and better shaping of the ball. Yeah, that's kind of the extent of it. Sweet spot, definitely the carbon has it on the width of the sweet spot. It's just an overall more forgiving because it is a wider paddle. Once you do weight these up, the Franklins, the sweet spot is very
Do you feel like either one of them had a particularly hot spot?
No.
Yeah, I didn't either.
No, I think they're pretty predictable where you're hitting the ball on the paddle. You're going to know what to expect.
So the fact that we each played a game with these and split those games just dead on, I think pretty well speaks to just the overall quality of these paddles and the fact that they can exploit their strengths, although different, somewhat equally.
Yeah. So, Eddie, what was your overall score? Which paddle edged out the other?
In terms of how we played in our games?
Your total points, which one won?
Oh, I actually don't remember.
Oh, really? Okay. So
this will be a surprise to me.
I tallied mine. I think we have the same winner. So my winner is the TruFoam. It won by 2 points over the C45, the Franklin C45. So what I did is after each game, I just tallied each one, right? So the TruFoam, we played 4 games to 6, right? And TruFoam got 14 points, and the C45 got 12. So it wasn't a big differential.
No.
But you won the first 3 games. I won the 4th. So that puts you at 18 points. And then you played with the Franklin last.
And got 2 points.
Okay. So that's, yeah. So
I got...
the carbon won for you too.
Yeah.
By 4 points.
Yes.
Right. Okay. So carbon won by 2 points for me and won by 4 points for you. So yeah, close.
Very close.
And it's not highly scientific by any means, but that's about how I felt in terms of my comfort with these paddles. Now, granted, I've been playing with the carbon for longer than the Franklin. I don't have this one dialed in, so there's going to be, that going into the equation. I'm sure you have too. We haven't had the Franklin for as long. So once we get it dialed in, I don't know if that would change anything. But
I actually have about equal time on those.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, but like I said, it's about how I perceived I was playing with the paddles. I was playing out just a little bit better with the carbon TruFoam.
I would say if you're one of those kitchen people that loves doing those like backhand flicks, needs that maneuverability just to move from space to space at the kitchen line, I would go with the Franklin. But if you're ground strokes, mid court resets, those kinds of things, it's hard to beat the carbon.
Yeah,
for me.
All right, Eddie. We will have either already put the interview in or we'll insert it now in post. But let's move on to Q&A, unless you have more to say about the paddles.
No, I think we're good. So our first question is really to both of us. Curious if either of you use eye protection glasses while playing. What types of lenses do you like? Clear, tinted, amber? What do you like in this space? Mm-hmm. And this is really relevant for me because I just started using this new scleral contact lens to kind of correct some double visionness in this eye. And man, it is working so good.
That is awesome.
You know those commercials where like, hey, come do LASIK because you're going to wake up the next day and the world's going to be crystal clear. I didn't have that with LASIK when I did LASIK. It was better, but it wasn't like this. This is like I'm wearing binoculars or something.
That is awesome. You have one in right now?
I have it in right now, and it has just fixed all of my issues.
That's amazing.
It is amazing. So I've moved from now prescription glasses to just regular over-the-counter glasses.
Yeah.
And what I'm using right now is Oakley makes a low-light lens. It's kind of got a purplish tint. Mm-hmm. It was created for, I think, the Winter Olympians because they were doing a lot of nighttime under-the-light types of events. Mm-hmm. And they created this tint for them, given the harshness of those lights outdoors. Mm-hmm. It also works great indoors.
Really?
Cut and glare, yeah.
So Oakley?
Yep.
Interesting. Do you have a model brand or the?
It's just called their low light lens. It's kind of got a little purplish tint, but
Okay.
I think they make it for multiple frames that they have.
Yeah. Well, for me, yes, I wear safety glasses all the time, and for me, I'm using the Brioti indoor glass, Brioti safety glasses with clear lenses for indoor. And I switch around. So Brioti and Raya are the two brands that I wear outside. Both have exceptional clarity, and they've tweaked the color spectrum on their lenses for outdoor play, and you can it really looks like you're playing on a HD screen, when you're playing on the court. But I can't play with any kind of tint indoors, so mine have to be completely clear. So I am interested in your Oakley lenses and to see if those would actually improve my perception of some kind of tint on an indoor lens.
It's very mild. I mean, you don't want to block the light that's available because some of these indoor places are kind of marginal anyway in terms of overall brightness. Mm-hmm. You just want to cut out some of the glare and the starburst that you might get.
And I don't even feel comfortable without without glasses.
Feel naked now,
right? Right.
I got to try those Briotis again because I wasn't able to wear them because they weren't prescription, but now I can revisit
clear
that.
A lens inside.
Oh my
God,
it's life changing. Instead of swinging at 3 balls coming at me, it's just one. Game's so easy.
Right. No wonder you mopped the floor with me today, Eddie.
No, not at all. This one's a good question and very topical for today. This is from Joan C. Can you explain plush? Does plush mean soft, as in when the paddle hits the ball, it doesn't feel jarring? And then what would be the opposite of plush?
Okay. I mean, that's my definition of plush is soft, like a pillow, right? Mm-hmm. And the opposite of plush being stiff, And vibration plays into that, and dwell plays into that as well. But when I say plush, I just simply mean the soft feel of the paddle. So some examples of a plush feeling paddle would be the Selkirk Lux and the Vatic Prism Flash. And then, even some Gen 3 paddles like the Ronbus Ripple, that's where it gets a little bit vague in terms of how we're defining plush or how I am, because that's where it gets more into dwell time. Like the Ripple feels very dwelly, but not quite super plush. You know what I mean? So I wouldn't call it pillowy because it's very springy, but it's also has a lot of dwell time. So,
is there a stiff paddle that you can think of that also has dwell time?
Yeah. Yeah. And it doesn't, you'd never know it has dwell time, but the Chorus Fire. it has dwell time, and it gets great spin because of that dwell time, but it feels like you're hitting a sheet of glass, because you're hitting that clear fiberglass on the outside.
Gotcha.
How about you? Is that how you define plush also?
Oh, yeah, just that softness, that kind of pillowy feeling.
Okay.
In an extreme example. I think the Lux is probably kind of your classic example of a plush feeling paddle.
Right. Other stiff feeling paddles, like the 6-0 double black diamond always felt stiff to me in the black diamond series also. A lot of the Gen 2 thermoformed paddles are stiff-ish. Another plush paddle is the Apes Pulse series. Those are very plush. Where would you put the Paddletech Bantams? That's a difficult one too.
I would kind of put that in the center of the spectrum.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, they feel softish, but they're springy at the same time, so you can't really call those plush, but they're not stiff either.
Right.
So yeah, in the middle.
Great question, Joan. Appreciate that. This is from Alaric Bishop. Hey, John and Eddie, what's the most comfortable handle you've ever used?
Handle like alternative name?
Sure.
I don't have a lot of alternative names. I think Kew is the most
right. There you go.
long-lasting handle, at least, and it was purely accidental.
Any nicknames growing up that you want to?
No. How about you? Any big nicknames?
Oh, just Eddie. Growing up, yeah.
Full name,
Asian redneck.
Asian redneck.
I grew up in this little farm town in Maryland.
Okay.
About an hour from D.C. And our biggest club was the Future Farmers of America. So it's definitely in the minority there.
All right.
But handle, I don't really, I don't prefer necessarily the most comfortable handle because the most comfortable ones are probably going to be the ones on the softer end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
And as I've said many times, I like the feedback from a handle that's very firm. Off-center hits, you're going to feel those, and I want that feedback.
Yeah.
And so a PU handle, we talked about the body Helix, I think is a great example of kind of that firmness that I'm looking for.
Yeah, there are a bunch that are really good. So the Neonic also makes PU molded handles. Like you said, the Body Helix does. The gearbox, the gearboxes have exceptional handles. They're fully molded carbon fiber, and especially those ultimates. I mean, it's foam all the way through down into the handle, and you don't feel any unwanted vibrations in those handles. And they're narrow and firm. I've come full 180, Eddie. I used to hate gearbox handles because they were so small. Their circumference was so small. And I would beef them up with like 4 layers of overwrap. And looking back on that, I'm like, why? Why did I ever do that? Because they make exceptional handles. And I even like the way they taper at the neck. Because you take the band off, the rubber band, and your hand just fits in there perfectly for two-handed backhands. It's just a really good handle. And that's probably my favorite.
A great example. What I really don't care for is when you can feel these sharp edges, right where the kind of the short flat meets with the wider flat.
Yeah.
And oftentimes there's a sharp edge there where whatever they're using, balsa wood sometimes kind of doesn't necessarily flushly come in with
I know what you mean.
the side. That's not the best.
And neither one of us like the squishy handles either. So that they put these pallets on that are EVA foam, and you can press into them and they're squishy. Not only that, but that indentation stays there.
Exactly.
So it gets all lumpy.
Well, thanks for the questions. I think one of the things I really like doing, John, are these head-to-head battles between paddles. So, if anybody wants to see a particular matchup, we'd love to entertain that.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah, give us some ideas for which paddles you want to see battle it out.
Right on.
All right, Eddie, that is a wrap for today. I don't have anything else unless you do.
Nope, just glad to be back on the courts. It feels great to have my health back and be able to play pickleball. And
you're healthy and you can see. Everything's going great for you in 2025, Eddie.
Let's go.
All right,
See you.
Take care.